Good evening and welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking the time out of your night to join us for our public hearing that we're having this evening. This is a public hearing for an EGLE application that was received for wetland crossings associated with Little Trout Solar Farm access roads in Presque Isle County. My name is Ryan Blazik. I'm with EGLE's Environmental Support Division. I'm just going to be helping to facilitate and moderate the hearing tonight. So before we get too far, I have a couple things to share with you and go through. First thing is our agenda for tonight. We have a welcome that we're kind of going through right now, and an introduction. A big thing to keep in mind, though, is that there's actually going to be two parts to tonight's events. We're going to have an informational session, so we're going to start off with the applicant, and they're going to have an opportunity to present some information on the proposed project. And we're going to follow that up with a question and answer session where you'll be able to ask questions on the project and application. We'll go through the ways to submit an official comment. And then we're actually going to go through the public hearing part tonight. And that's where everybody's going to have an opportunity to make a statement on this application for the record associated with this project. And then we'll also let you know who to contact in case you have further questions after tonight. All right, a couple logistical things. All lines are going to be muted during this hearing, unless it's your turn to speak, in which we'll explain how we'll go through that. And we'll call on you later. But you can submit questions in the Q&A box at any time, and we'll answer those questions once we get to the Q&A portion of tonight. We'll start to go through those questions. And then also we are recording this hearing. So this will be posted on our YouTube channel in a couple days, so you can rewatch it or forward it on if you so choose. All right, so at this time, I'd like to invite our other EGLE staff who are on the line to turn their cameras on and introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is John Walt. I'm an environmental quality analyst in the Gaylord District Office and also the file manager for this application.
And welcome, everyone. I'm Joe Haas, the Gaylord District Office Supervisor. I supervise staff covering the regulatory resource programs in the Gaylord District counties in the northern Lower Peninsula. Thank you for taking the time to be here this evening.
All right, thank you both. We're going to go ahead and move on to the informational session for tonight. And so we have a couple applicant representatives, Don Berninger and Brittany Zacharias from Atwell LLC. It looks like we have unmuted you both, Don and Brittany, so you can feel free to unmute yourselves. You can begin when you're ready. I have your slides here. I have some slides to go through. When you want me to change a slide, just let me know and I'll change it for you. And other than that, yeah, we'll try to keep it to around 10-15 minutes so we have some time for questions. Welcome and thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. My name is Brittany Zacharias. As you mentioned, I work with Atwell. I'm going to touch on DTE as a company. So if you want to move to the first slide. So as a general introduction, DTE is a Detroit-based diversified energy company involved in the development and management of energy-related businesses and services nationwide, serving 1.3 million customers in Michigan. DTE has been involved with the development of solar energy systems throughout Michigan since 2008 and is the leading producer and investor in renewable energy in the state of Michigan. Recent Michigan legislation, specifically House Bills 5120 and 5121, have set ambitious renewable energy targets for utilities in the state. These bills require utilities to transition from 100% clean energy sources by 2040, with a minimum of 60% coming from renewable sources like wind or solar. So the project they're talking about tonight, the Little Trout Solar Project, is a 150 megawatt solar facility that will contribute to the overall goals of Michigan's Clean, Renewable, and Efficient Energy Act, Public Act 295, by supplying clean, renewable energy to approximately 24,000 homes.
Thanks, Brittany. Ryan, would you please go to the next slide? Hello, everyone. My name is Don Berninger. I'm with Atwell as well and assisting in presenting the project. This next slide and the next handful of slides really talk a little bit about the Little Trout Solar Park overview and a little bit of the summary of proposed resource impacts. So the Little Trout Solar Project encompasses approximately 800 acres located within Belknap and Pulawski Townships in Presque Isle County, Michigan. On-site natural resource assessments were conducted by Atwell staff on September 26th, September 30th, 2021, June 2nd through the 4th on 2022, and May 8th through the 10th on 2023, which covered an approximately 2,173 acre study area. So the 800 acres was pared down from the original 2,000 acres. So 800 acres is project area, 2,173 was the overall study area. The site layout presented minimizes overall natural resource impacts, and we'll get to that slide in a moment. The summary of proposed resource impacts. So I just want to go over some highlights here. No permanent watercourse impacts are proposed. No permanent floodplain impacts are proposed. And the total permanent wetland impact is 0.09 acre of permanent wetland impact. That includes 65 cubic yards of cut and 250 cubic yards of fill. The total temporary wetland impact proposed is 0.46 acres for construction activities. Those will be restored following construction. Ryan, next slide, please. Thank you. So this figure shows the overall proposed site plan for the Little Trout Solar Project that was included in the Eagle permit application. The shaded gray areas are proposed solar arrays, and the green areas are Eagle regulated wetlands that were identified through on-site assessment activities, including wetland and water feature delineations and habitat assessments. As you can see, the project design has purposely avoided and minimized impacts to natural resources to the extent practicable through careful planning and siting of the project infrastructure. Next slide, please. So the next three slides zoom in on the impacts. I'll run through them quickly, but what I do want to note on this is you'll see this says impact 1, and it's 0.11 acre of disturbed impact. So on these plans, we combined temporary and permanent impacts. So keep in mind the overall permanent impact is 0.09. So this includes some permanent and some temporary. So this slide shows impact associated for an access drive. Culvert is associated with there as well. Ryan, next slide. This next slide shows several impacts associated with an access drive, some perimeter fence, and some underground utilities. Ryan, next slide. And this impact again shows proposed impacts for an access drive and associated culvert. Those are the zoomed in slides there. Ryan, you can put slide 10 back on if that's all right. Nope.
It looks like those are all the slides I had. Did you want to go back?
Nope. That's good. We're good there. Just want to do a fly through. So I imagine now we can go through the Q&A.
Yep. Yeah, thanks, Don and Brittany. Yeah, you're exactly right. That's kind of the next part of tonight. If you have a question to ask, I do have one in here I want to address first, but I will first let you know how to ask a question. You can submit a question using the Q&A box. You see it at the bottom of your screen, just type that in. You can click the hand icon at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand, and you'll be able to ask your question verbally. Or if it's people on the phone, we do have people on the phone. You can select #2 on your receiver, and that will raise your hand in Zoom, and we'll call on you using the last 4 digits of your phone number. So you can type it in the box, click the hand icon to raise your hand, and then we'll kind of go back and forth between calling on people. And I should mention, this is specifically for asking questions. If you have a statement that you would like to make, we'll get to that part next. But if you have a question that we can help answer, That's what time this is for. So, Joe and John, if you want to turn your cameras on, the first question is before the meeting gets too far, they feel like it would be helpful. Some attendees are here to comment on the solar project as a whole. We talked about in the meeting about what this is about. We have mentioned in this meeting what tonight is about, which is the wetland impacts. In the interest of not wasting anyone's time, will you be able to explain what the meeting is not about? And so I know we mentioned this a little bit, I think, in the hearing statement, but can you, I guess, talk about what we're not here to talk about today, Joe or John?
Um, this is Joe here, District Supervisor. I can speak a little bit about that, but I'm going to be careful because I'm not sure, what the main concerns are. I did see the 7 and 4 news story that was on television 2 nights ago, right? They came out to the area and interviewed a few people, and there were some concerns that were expressed. Our review is really limited to what our regulatory authority is. We're not going to review the fact that, we don't have any authority over reviewing the fact that, there's farmland that's being converted to solar use. That's sort of a combination of private property rights and the local zoning and local regulations. As far as my understanding goes, there may be more layers to that, but it's not part of the review that is, that we're talking about tonight. We're not going to really be able to talk about property values adjacent to this site. That's not something that's part of our review. Again, we are the Water Resource Division. This is a Part 303 wetland permit. It's a permit application, an application to impact wetlands. And we do have very strict criteria when it comes to that, limits when it comes to avoiding and minimizing where we would get to a point where we would require mitigation. The 0.09 or roughly, 0.1 acre does not meet the criteria where we would generally require mitigation. We can always require some type of mitigation, but I'm not sure that's going to assuage the concerns of folks that may be participating here and that may be in the area. In any case, those are the main things that come to my mind, but maybe as the conversation moves along, we can address other questions that might come. I don't know if anybody else has anything else to add. Feel free.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Yeah, we just have another question that popped into the Q&A box while you were talking. How much of the 800-acre solar array is located over the wetland areas?
Yeah, I can talk briefly about that, as was presented a little bit earlier as well, that Don talked about, is that the wetland impacts that are being reviewed by Eagle are for access roads. So the solar arrays themselves, or the panels, are not proposed to be over top of any wetlands. So this 0.09 acres of permanent wetland impact that we are reviewing for is solely for access roads or for security fencing surrounding the solar farm.
Yeah, thanks for that information clarification, John. I think that helps. Are there any other questions out there? I don't have any in the Q&A box right now. Again, if you will have a question, you can type it in the Q&A box that you see at the bottom of your screen, hit enter, and it will show up in front of me and I can ask your question. Or you can raise your hand in Zoom using the raise hand icon that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. Click that, raise your hand, and we'll call on you. You can ask your question verbally. Or if you're on the phone, you can also raise your hand by selecting #2 in your receiver. That'll raise your hand and we'll call on you using the last 4 digits of your phone number. And then we'll unmute you. You can unmute yourself and ask your question. And seeing, here we go. Where would one find the entire permit process for this kind of project? And I'm not sure if that's referring to Eagle's process or any other related permits that.
Yeah,
might be
well,
required.
to my mind, that's going to be spelled out in Part 303, both the statute and rules. That's what we're going to use to address this permit application.
And-
It also, that's pretty much the comprehensive review.
Okay.
Joe, on your website, you do have kind of an easier process. I even think there's a one sheet deal. It doesn't get as involved as what you said, but if it helps, a layperson understand the process.
No, thanks, Don.
All right. Thank you both. Why go through the wetlands at all? Why can't you have different sections that are non-congruent?
That might be a question. We do review for avoiding and minimizing wetland impacts. So Atwell mentioned as well their report and their study that they have done in the area to avoid and minimize wetlands as much as possible. Certainly, there are a lot of wetlands in the area. I am not aware of the ins and outs of necessary access or emergency access for all solar farms. So perhaps Atwell may be able to answer some of that for select areas that were chosen for access. But either way, that being said, looking at the wetland impacts and the overall wetlands in the area, their avoidance of wetlands is to the greatest extent possible, it appears. But that's how we do review things. So it's a great question of can we avoid wetlands? That's one of the questions that we do ask and that we vet through the permit application process as well.
And to add to that, John, and thank you for that. We did go into great detail in the alternatives analysis. So, and that is publicly available. So I would recommend reading the alternative analysis, and I'm sure that question would be answered in there.
All right, thank you. And I've got some clarification on the question that was asked previously as far as the process and the questions from the start of thinking about this kind of project through its entire process. Maybe just you could spell out a little more just as far as what Eagle's process and timelines are. Permit application is received for the project, and then what the review process, and then what will happen after tonight's public hearing. If you wouldn't mind, that might be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we receive a permit application, and from that point, it starts our timeline for how long we have to review an application for wetland impacts under Part 303. We have 120 days to review this application, so long as it isn't placed on hold for any administratively incompleteness. This application was complete upon being received. So we then go forward after we've reviewed all the material in there, determine whether or not this project is one that requires public noticing. And this was one that did require public noticing. And so a public notice was sent out for 20 days. I don't have the exact dates in front of me, but it was sent out for 20 days to adjacent property owners, along with other interest groups such as DNR Fisheries, DNR Wildlife, township or county clerks, soil and erosion agents, so on. And after that 20 days, we review comments and review whether or not a public hearing has been requested, which for this application one was, and that's why we're here tonight. And so following a request for public hearing, we usually try and schedule them at least 30 days out to give enough time for people to be informed and for a good date and time to be scheduled, in which we're here now today on April 25. Following this, we'll get into this more a little bit later, but there will be a 10-day period following this where additional comments can be submitted, not just in this public hearing format. And then going forward from there, the application review would be continued. Currently, the processing due date for a decision is sometime in June. And so a decision will most likely be made by then unless some sort of extension or something else is requested. That's sort of a general outline of the time frame of reviewing applications. Hopefully that gets at some of that question.
All right, thanks, John. I think that helped. And then I have several more questions in here, and I related to why the wetlands have to be disrupted, and what we look for a review of the wetlands. And so I don't know, maybe you can go into a little more depth, if you wouldn't mind, as far as you know, what we look at, feasible and prudent alternatives, and that type of thing. I think that might help some people. So I'm kind of grouping some questions together
Sure.
here as to the explanation as to why wetlands need to be impacted.
Sure. Yeah. So when we review for feasible and prudent alternatives, we're reviewing whether there are any upland areas that might not require a permit to cross at all. So that's some of that first question. That was why go through wetlands at all. Again, there is an alternatives analysis that has been provided and is available as well for this. I certainly don't have the whole thing memorized or in front of me right here to read it off. It's relatively lengthy, but additionally, if it's found that wetlands cannot be completely avoided, then we look at minimizing wetland impacts. So what we're looking at is crossing through the narrowest sections of wetlands, having the least amount of road, the narrowest width that we can, while still accomplishing the project purpose that may be there. In this case, it's accessing the solar farm, along with seeing if there are portions of upland wetlands that we can cross into the uplands and then back into wetlands, again, getting at that narrowest portion, least amount of wetland impacts, making sure that there's proper drainage between the wetlands. Things like that is part of our analysis. So we do look at avoiding wetlands first, making sure that we're not going into wetlands. And if that has been demonstrated to not be possible, that's when we're looking at minimizing the amount of fill or cutting or dredging, as was mentioned as well, within the wetlands to the smallest amount, while looking at accomplishing that project purpose of access. I don't know if Joe has anything else to add for that, but that's the gist of the review for that.
No, I think there's just the sort of what I would call the trifecta of our review: avoid, and to the greatest extent possible. Once that's been done, then we minimize to the greatest extent possible. Once that's been done, we could consider potentially mitigation, and that's not really even on the table here as far as mitigation. We haven't gotten to that point. So it looks like we're considering avoiding and minimization to the greatest extent possible. Doesn't meet the criteria that we would have to require mitigation. It's a small impact relatively. There is a question I see about, and I don't mean to steal your thunder, Ryan, about
No, take it away.
additional requirements or other regulatory authorities. And maybe Don, Brittany, or somebody could speak to that. There aren't other permits from us. I mean, you'll need a Part 91 soil erosion permit. We oversee that program, but that's administered at the county level. But not from us. There are other state agencies that oversee energy projects. That's not us, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Joe, and if I might add as well, if this were a farm needing field access or housing construction problem, our review of those applications are the exact same as ones for say solar farms. So whether it's a private individual or a business, corporation, another government agency such as the DNR, our processes remains the same for reviewing those applications.
All right, thank you both. Next question I have. And this one is kind of along somewhat the same lines, but so if there weren't wetland issues, the project wouldn't have any public input because the land was privately owned and DTE is a corporate entity. Is that correct? So the question is, if I guess related to if there's any other, would there have been any other mechanism for public input? And I'm not sure we can answer this because we're focused on the wetland portion of this. But any thoughts on, or I'm not sure if anyone can speak to any other knowledge of public input related to this project at the local level, potentially. I don't know.
Sure.
I think at the state level, there is another layer of authority. And again, I don't know if Don and Brittany have a response to that, but I think there were some opportunities for public comment at that level outside of Eagle.
Yes, there was last year a special use permit was approved, so there was a process, and that's all publicly available information. There was a special use permit approved last year.
Okay. Thank you. I think that answers the question. And then we're almost to that time where we're going to move on, and this is the last question. And this is, I'm not sure how much we can speak to this, but the question is why we're putting in the roads, culverts, installing security fencing. And that's the question, the statement is then it's intrusive. So I don't know if there's anything that can be said as far as why all of this is needed for the solar farm. I'm assuming that's where this is getting at.
Well, obviously they need road access to maintain equipment that would include culverts and other infrastructure associated with that. Security fencing, I think, is standard around these facilities to avoid vandalism or other sort of trespassing that might occur. I don't know. And that's just me speculating. We have no, that's not part of our review as far as the most of that. It's only where it impacts the regulated resource that we have review authority. So we can't tell them they can't put a fence around the whole facility.
No, I think that's helpful, Joe. And we're going to wrap up this Q&A session. So thank you, Joe and John, and also our Atwell representatives for presenting and for being part of that Q&A session, and to all of you for asking those questions. We're going to move on to the next part of tonight. But before we do, I want to go through the other ways you can submit a comment. So in a couple minutes, we're going to go through anyone who wants to make a comment can on this project. But there's some other ways you can do that as well. You can do that through Eagle's My Enviro application under submission HPZ AN3G MTAJG. And this is going to be put in the chat for those of you who are on your computers. You can also submit them by mail, though, if you'd like. And I'm going to read this off for those on the phone. You can submit it by mail to Eagle, EGLE, Water Resources Division, at the Gaylord District Office, and the address is 2100 M32 in Gaylord, Michigan, 49735. And this comment period will be open until May 5th. So you have 10 days to make your comment. All right, and now we're going to go ahead and move on to the public hearing portion of tonight. And I do see we have a raised hand, but we're going to wait until if you have a question, we're past the Q&A part. So if that raised hand has a question, I'll show you John's information later and you can ask that question at that time. Or if you have a statement to make, we'll get to you here in a little bit. We're going to explain how we're going to go through and how everyone's going to have a turn making statements. Just hold on for one moment. So with that, we're going to go ahead and open the public hearing. So John, I'd like to invite you to read the opening statement to get things kicked off for us.
Great. Thanks again, everybody, for being here. My name is John Walt, and I am the district representative in the Water Resources Division of the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, or EGLE. I will be serving as the hearing officer for this public hearing on EGLE submission number HPZAN3G MTAJG. With me tonight is also Joe Haas, who introduced himself. He is the Gaylord District Office Supervisor of EGLE Water Resources Division. To describe how this is going to work tonight, I will begin with some background information about why we are here tonight. I will then describe the purpose of the hearing and how your comments will be used. Following that, I will outline the procedures under which we will take your comments and then describe what will happen after tonight's hearing. It will then be time for you to provide comments, and we will spend the majority of the time tonight listening to those comments. At the end of the hearing, I will read the closing statement. By way of background information, the Water Resources Division is responsible for administering a variety of programs that help to protect inland lakes and streams, wetlands, floodplains, sand dunes, and the Great Lakes. These programs regulate certain activities such as dredging or filling a lake, stream, or wetland, constructing a dam, constructing a marina, placing shore protection or constructing docks, and building in a designated critical sand dune area, wetland, or floodplain. The law governing those responsibilities is the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act, 1994 PA 451 as amended, Act 451. The wetland impacts that the Water Resources Division are reviewing is the permanent 0.09 acres of wetland fill for access roads through wetlands and a total of 330 linear feet of security fencing that passes through wetlands. In order for a permit to be granted, EGLE must find that the proposed activities described in the public notice meet certain criteria set by Part 303, the Wetlands Protection Act of Act 451. In general, we must consider the effect of the proposed project on wetlands. When reviewing an application for a permit under the provisions of Part 303 Wetlands Protection of Act 451, EGLE is charged to make the following indications as required by Section 303.11 of Part 303. A permit for an activity listed in Section 303.04 shall not be approved unless the department determines that the issuance of a permit is in the public interest, that the permit is necessary to realize the benefits derived from the activity, and that the activity is otherwise lawful. A permit shall not be issued unless it is shown that an unacceptable disruption will not result to the aquatic resources. A permit shall not be issued unless the applicant also shows either of the following. A, the proposed activity is primarily dependent on being located in a wetland, or B, a feasible and prudent alternative does not exist. The purpose of tonight's hearing is to give anyone interested in the wetland impacts proposed by DTE Energy an opportunity to provide information that EGLE can use in making the decision whether or not to issue a permit. Please recognize that EGLE can only use the information you provide if it relates to the criteria that EGLE must use in making a decision. Some of you may simply want to express your support or opposition to the project. We'll be happy to take note of that position, but please understand that EGLE is, by law, not allowed to base our decision on whether or not there's widespread support or opposition to the project. In just a moment, I will outline the procedures we will use for taking your comments. But before I do so, I need to mention that the notice of this hearing was published in the Presque Isle County Advance on Thursday, April 11 of 2024. As we discussed at the beginning of the informational session, if you have a comment to provide, raise your hand in the Zoom toolbar. To ensure that the hearing is conducted in a fair manner, we will follow these steps. First, the applicant and/or consultant has already had an opportunity to describe the proposed project. Second, we will then call on those who have indicated in their registration that they would like to speak. After that, we will call on all those that raise their hand in their Zoom toolbar that would like to make a comment if they haven't already been called upon. As a reminder, if you are participating in this hearing via telephone only, follow the directions of the moderator on how to identify that you would like to make a comment. You may also submit your comments to Eagle via the MyEnviro portal, email, or US mail. When all the comments have been completed, we'll ask that if anyone would like to make a statement. When your name is called, your microphone will be unmuted. As you begin your comments, please state your name and any group or association you may represent. Each person will be given 4 minutes to make their comments. We will indicate to you when you have 1 minute left. Please begin wrapping up your comments and end within the allotted time. If need be, we will indicate when your time has ended. I ask that we all be courteous and respectful to one another tonight. Please also recognize that Eagle staff is here tonight to provide a fair opportunity for you to express your comments on the proposed project and to listen to those comments. This hearing is being recorded, and your comments will be a part of the information Eagle will consider in making its decision on whether or not to issue a permit on the proposed project. The public comment period for this public hearing is open for 10 days from the date of this hearing, ending on May 5 of 2024. Additional information and comments submitted in writing during the 10-day public comment period will also be considered in Eagle's decision. Following the close of the public comment period, Eagle will make a decision to either issue a permit for the project as proposed or with modifications or send a letter of denial. You may find out what the decision is by checking the Eagle MyEnviro portal website and searching for the application number, which is again HPZAN3GMTAJG. Thank you for your attention. We will begin calling the names of those who have indicated that they would like to make a statement now.
Yeah, many thanks, John. Thanks for reading that. Couple other quick things. As John mentioned, everyone will have 4 minutes apiece. You'll be seeing a timer pop up on the screen it'll count down and show you how much time you have. And then you'll hear this noise when you have 1 minute left. And what that'll basically mean is that, just so you know, you're going to need to start wrapping up once you get to once you run out of time. It's also going to be 1 comment per person, but if you have more than 1 person on the line when you're called, just let me know, and we'll go on to them next and let them make their comment. And again, Eagle cannot respond to these comments at this time, so you'll be able to make your comment, and if you have a follow-up question, I'll be providing John's contact information a little bit later on that you can follow up with John. And then also, once you're called upon, please list your name and any affiliation that you have. If you're on the phone, you can select #2 to raise your hand, or you can raise your hand using the raise hand icon on Zoom. So we're going to start first with I have 1 name during registration who indicated they want to make a comment, Eric Stone. So we're going to start with Eric, and then we're going to go to anybody else who'd like to make a comment and has their hand raised, and we're going to be here until everyone has had an opportunity to make a comment. So everyone will have that opportunity. So with that, Eric, it looks like you are unmuted. You can begin your comment when you're ready.
My name is Eric Stone. I'm here on behalf of my mother, Marilyn Stone, who could not be here today. Our family farm is located directly across from the first of the proposed entrances and access roads on Highway 441, just south of the Swan River Bridge. This area encompasses vital wetlands that flow north into the pristine Swan River, a river that runs through our property, meanders through the planned solar project site, and flows into Lake Huron. Swan River and its extensive watershed support a diverse ecosystem, including spawning fish, otters, beavers, bobcats, turtles, and nesting eagles. Any disturbance to this watershed, which all the land involved in this project drains into, is unacceptable. Research underscores that wetlands provide essential services like water purification and flood control. The proposed project was never authorized to impact the river or adjacent wetlands, which is precisely why DTE is now seeking permits. Eagle should deny all permits that could impact these wetlands. DTE has the financial and technical capabilities to redesign the project to avoid environmental damage. It is not Eagle's role to facilitate the project, but to ensure our natural habitat are preserved. Compensatory measures that allow DTE to destroy wetlands here in exchange for creating or preserving wetlands elsewhere are not acceptable. The cost of such actions is too great and irreversible. The proposed construction of entrances and access roads and the use of those access roads during the life of the project poses a significant continuing risk of silt and toxic runoff contaminating the river, which no amount of careful planning can completely mitigate. The ramifications of DTE's actions extend beyond the few property owners who stand to benefit financially from leasing their land for the project. Protecting the Swan River watershed concerns all residents of this area in our state. It is deeply concerning and frankly an affront that DTE would even propose to encroach upon these wetlands. A responsible approach would have involved designing the project to align with the natural terrain and watershed, thereby avoiding any potential harm to the wetlands. The impact area I am most familiar with is Impact Area 1, which is an access road off of Highway 441 leading up into the property owned by Jim Deletka. That access road is not necessary. It simply can be moved so that access to the solar arrays it services can be gained from the interior of the site. In conclusion, DTE can and should reconfigure its project without encroaching on any wetlands. The choices they make in designing their infrastructure should not dictate the decisions of Eagle. I urge Eagle to act in the interest of all stakeholders, especially those of us not involved with the project, but who will suffer its consequences, and deny the permits for DTE to build on or near our wetlands. Thank you for your attention to this critical matter.
Yeah, thank you for your comment, Eric. All right, so next up, if anybody has a comment to make, anyone else on the line, please raise your hand in Zoom using the raised hand icon. Or if you're on the phone, selecting #2. All right, oh, it looks like I had a raised hand, but don't have one now. Oh, there we are. Terry Cambray, you can, we're going to unmute you, and then you can unmute yourself and begin your comment when you're ready. So you should see a microphone icon at the bottom of your screen, Terry, and just click that.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay,
Begin when
great.
you're ready.
Great, thank you. Your regulatory portion, prohibited activities, MC 4.30304 states that before Eagle will issue a Part 303 permit, the permittee will have to show one, and the main function here, the main one, the proposed wetland impact is primarily dependent upon being in a wetland. Absolutely not the case. Solar not need to be in a wetland to exist. Or number two, no feasible alternatives are available to the wetlands. Is your decision based on money? Because this is unconscionable. There is absolutely no reason that we need to go in there and put culverts and fence off wetlands when there are animals and birds and salmon and everything else that need to use that Swan River. And the other thing is, when those solar panels are disturbed or destroyed, as happens with hailstorms, etc., there is cadmium and lead that is leached into the soil. It leaches into the soil and then into the underlying watershed. And then this could end up in the Great Lakes. Is this the kind of action that we need to take here in Michigan? We have such a great resource with the natural waters that, to me, there is absolutely no reason to take that kind of a chance. So I do not think it's feasible to, or going with your rules, the MCL rule that I stated, that we need to be looking at disturbing a wetland at all. That's the end of my statement.
All right, yeah,
I think
thanks
it's
for-
unconscionable.
Yeah, thanks for your comment, Terry.
You're welcome.
All right. Is there anybody else on the line who would like to make a comment tonight? I don't have any other raised hands. We'll give you a couple seconds here in case there is somebody. And again, just raise your hand using the icon at the bottom of your screen and we'll call on you. If you're on the phone, select #2 on your receiver and we will unmute you and then you'll be able to unmute yourself using your phone and make your comment. If we don't have anybody else making comments tonight, just so you know, the next step will be what we'll be doing is providing you the other ways to submit a comment again that we went through already, just in case you end up changing your mind and would like to make a comment by one of those other methods. And then I'll be providing John's contact information in case you have any follow-up questions for John. All right. And I'm still not seeing any other raised hands tonight, so we are going ahead and close out this portion. So, John, would you want to read the closing statement for tonight?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your comments and cooperation. We appreciate your interest in the proposed project and that you took the time to be here tonight. As indicated at the beginning of the hearing, you may submit additional written comments until May 5 of 2024. Following the close of the public comment period, we will consider all comments received and make a decision on the proposed project. Just to remind those that may still want to submit a comment, comments can be submitted via My Enviro portal, email, or US mail. The hearing is now closed. Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks again, John. Yeah, if you have the slide up here that I showed you before, and as John mentioned, you could submit comments through My Enviro. Submission HPZAN3GMTAJG, and that was put in the chat. So you can access it there. You can also submit comments to Eagle Water Resources Division at the Gaylord District Office, 2100M32 in Gaylord, Michigan, 49735. And the comment period is open for 10 days, which is May 5th, like John had mentioned. If you have any additional questions, you can contact John, John Walt, at 989-619-6283. That's 989-619-6283, or at waltj@michigan.gov. And that's WALTJ@MICHIGAN.gov. Any closing comments for us tonight, Joe?
You know I do, Ryan and everyone. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to be actively involved in this hearing. Public involvement is a priority for Eagle, and your participation is important to us, particularly when it comes to protecting our shared natural resources for present and future generations. Your comments are an important part of making the state's project review thorough and complete. I think we heard some very good questions tonight, and I thank everybody who offered questions and has concerns. I just would say thank you again for your participation, your comments, and cooperation. We appreciate your interest in this application for a permit by taking the time to attend.
Yeah, many thanks, Joe, and everyone who was part of this process tonight. Thing I'll leave you with is just a reminder that this hearing was recorded. It'll be on Eagle's YouTube channel in a couple days, so you can access it there and watch it again if you would like to, or forward on if someone might have missed it tonight. So with that, I hope you all have a great rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you.